All right, then we should be back on live. It has been actually quite a while. It looks like I looked at our live streams, and I think it was 2 months ago. Where the reason was every one of us was super heads down on stuff, right? Even our people from the content area. So there are a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. First of all, had everyone a good holiday vacation and stuff? It's good. Everyone's relaxed. In Italy, at least, it's can be kind of stressful. I don't know how it is like throughout the world, but like in Italy, it's like you go meet your parents, you meet your brothers, your sister, like your cousins, and like aunts and whatnot, like couple dinners, and so it can be actually stressful schedule wise.
You go like around, like one house to another house, or does
Kind
everyone
of,
just meet
yeah.
up at one house?
No, yeah, it can different variations of it, right? It depends on like where people are located. But like, given it's mostly just a week, it can be kind of stressful sometimes. But it's nice. Like that's something in Italy where, yeah, it has to happen over holidays, kind of mandatory. Cool. But the main theme today was kind of look a bit back on 2023. We had a release blog post going out with the main highlights. You can find that also. Let me actually share my screen just to bring it up. You can find that on dev.to or on our own blog on blog with Narwhal.io. So that kind of gives you some of the highlights that happened in 2023. We are actually going to dive into some of those. We won't have time to mention all of them. So we're kind of just touching on some of them here. As well as if you go to dev.to/nx, we also have the latest 17.2 update. So the release that we pushed out back in December, just before the holiday break. And so we're kind of going to have some mix going through some of the parts in those two articles. And dive a bit deeper, give you all an overview. As usual, obviously, if you have questions, feel free to bring them up in the chat. We have Zach there answering, and we can bring it up on the stream and kind of dive deeper into some of the aspects that people are interested in. All right, so to get started, actually, I can start with some of the things that happened more on the content side. So if you go to that highlight article that we have on dev.to, from the community perspective, what is really cool to see is that a lot of the open source repositories, many of the big open source repositories, also kind of well-known ones, have started to adopt NX as part of their toolchain. And this is mainly thanks to an effort that we had already a couple years ago, where it allows you to add NX very easily to your toolchain, right? So it's basically just adding the NX package, and you will get like the task scheduling and caching. And so that allows people to really easily adopt NX on their existing code base, just speeding up their existing package JSON scripts. And that's kind of it. Right, so we have like some. I picked out just some random ones that are kind of known throughout the community. So Tensec is pretty popular, especially in the React community. They also now have an adapter for Tensec query for Angular, so it kind of spreads out into other frameworks as well, which is quite exciting. So if you're in that space, definitely also check out Dominic, which is doing a fantastic work on that one. Has a really nice blog. It's going really deep on some of those aspects. There's Sentry, RxJS, which is huge. There's Analog, which got quite some hype recently, thanks to Brennan and Chow from our team, where they kind of push the limits of Angular a bit further, kind of exploring some experimental new .ng files, which is actually pretty exciting. And there's Quickifiers community from the Quick ecosystem, where they had built up an entire, like, that's actually a good showcase of how you can use NX also as a platform to build your own stack on top. So they have a bunch of generators that allow you to really easily spin up a new Quick project in a monorepo, but not necessarily a monorepo. So it's actually a good showcase project as well if you want to dive into that area. There's also Builder.io Mitosis, which is a really cool project, actually quite ambitious one, where it allows you to cross-compile like one component format into many other ones, like framework-specific ones. And they started adopting NX specifically to speed up their CI. Jason, I remember, I think, right, collaborated quite a bit with them to help them set it up and untangle some of the weird things that they had going on their CI system. And then there's Ghost. If you're into blogging, Ghost has been around for actually quite some time. And so they started adopting Learn, I think, and now migrated to a fully NX-powered workspace. I think James was involved into that one. So they have quite
Ghost the competitor of WordPress at some time. I remember it was along those lines.
Yeah,
something
I
like
just
that.
remember it has been like, I don't know how long they have been around, but like it must have been quite some years ago, because I remember
Yeah,
when
a
I
long
started
time, I
looking
think,
into
yeah.
blog. Yeah, it was almost 10 years, I think, because I remember them starting and I looked into that at that point. I didn't look into it recently, but I know someone from, I think, the Angry community started recently a blog post, the blog setup, blog platform with Ghost, and he was actually super satisfied with newsletter integration, a bunch of stuff that is really cool. And so yeah, they adopted an X specifically for development of their monorepo here of Ghost itself, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, you can see 11 years ago, 11 years old.
Oh yeah, yeah. Pretty much what I expected. Like that was back then when I started.
That's a
looking into some
stable
posts.
project.
Oh yeah, and it evolved quite a lot. Like from what I've seen, like last week, it actually quite impressive. So yeah, community-wise, I have a couple other points as well. Like there's the NX Champions program that we launched. So that is basically analogous to, if you want, the GD program, Microsoft MVC program, where we just elect or kind of have a bunch of folks that are excited about NX, that frequently promote NX, talk about it, create community content, are basically good citizens of the community and help out others. We wanted to have a more formal program where we kind of talk to them more regularly. And so we started last year with a bunch of people. It's actually a smallish group right now, but we want to definitely expand it this year as well. So if you're curious if that's something where you would be interested in, at nx.dev/community, there's a bunch of links, as well as like an application form where we can basically ask for joining, and then we will reach out as we expand the program and have more folks on there. And it's actually been pretty fun to have a closer group of people to reach out with early feedback and engage a bit more with them. That goes also a bit hand in hand with the Discord server. So if you're not on Discord yet, we had a huge Slack community, but Discord is just more useful or more suitable, let's say, for open source communities. A lot of them are being hosted there. And so we decided to finally do this step that was in the planning actually for quite a bit. So we moved over last year around, I think, September, if I'm not wrong. And it's growing really well. Like this is the numbers that I had like picked out back in December, so a couple of weeks ago. And it's growing really fast. There's some good discussions going on. So definitely check that out if you haven't been there yet. And then there's a bunch of improvements that we made to the docs as well. That is mostly happened last year. It is an ongoing effort, as docs are in general. But mainly, if you're interested in navigating our docs, this is a good section to check out, where we try to have different sections of the docs that target specific necessities that you might have. Basically, more conceptual docs, more recipe docs, where you just jump in, get the steps you need, and then leave the docs again. So, and then more learning-oriented concepts like tutorials. So definitely check that out. But that's enough talking from my end. One of the things that we kind of started promoting a bit more, throughout our talks and like blog posts and stuff that you might have seen, is like a concept like Rust that has come up quite a lot in last year as well. So many dev tools have started migrating parts of it over to Rust. We've actually waited quite a bit. I think we talked about it for quite a while as well, like looked into it, made some experiments. John is one that led a lot of that effort, and is still working on a lot of the parts on it. So John, do you want to talk a bit about what we moved over to Rust, why we actually made that step, why we didn't just stay on TypeScript? Are we removing TypeScript entirely? So.
Yeah. Let's go through all of that. So we've been working on migrating a lot of the core performance critical parts to Rust almost for a year now. I think since last March or February. And then one of the big reasons is because it obviously needs to be, it's the core performance parts. And after a while, Node starts to just get bogged down with all the new features that we need to add to NX to make it easier for everybody to use. And to get rid of, not necessarily get rid of, but to limit Node, I guess, we want to go directly and use the hardware that you have. So with Rust, we're able to basically call native APIs to do some file walking or file reading for certain parts. And we're able to send that information to Node, and Node will be able to do things with that. We are not going to get rid of TypeScript. a lot of the business case or the business use cases or business logic is still written in TypeScript, and we basically pass pieces of information that are needed in Rust from JavaScript so that Rust uses as little business logic as possible to actually know about your certain things like reading the NX.json. We have that still in TypeScript. Getting your workspace root, that's still in TypeScript. So those things are still part of TypeScript, and that's still easy for everybody to contribute to because it's still TypeScript. And only in the core pieces, like I was saying, is in Rust, and those ones are the high level or low level things that not a lot of people are going to be touching outside of like the core team of NX.
Mhm.
And one of the bigger things that we did recently was the task hasher, and there's a lot of things to make sure that we got that ready for basically being as fast as possible.
Yeah, but this is basically the more core parts. So basically, I mostly like the tagline that we came up with here because like, it kind of describes a bit what you have been mentioning. So the
Yeah.
Rust is mostly for the speed part, while we still stick to the whole TypeScript part because like for extensibility purposes, obviously it's like still easiest way to approach, right?
Yeah. So, and one of the things with Rust that we can't do with, or we can't do easily with Node, is using threads properly. Like we could use workers and all that stuff, but the API for that is a bit weird. So in Rust, a lot of the like performance increases that we have is basically splitting data across the thread so that we could maximize your computer as best as we can. And another thing that we do is with a background thread. So when we first start up NX, we will walk your directory in a background thread from Rust so that Node will be able to do its whole bootstrapping thing and continue getting all the relative information that is needed for NX. And by the time that Node is ready, the Rust portion in the background thread would have already read your workspace, and things just join together. And it's a little trick that we're doing to make it faster, right? So we separate some processing in the background thread. We let Node do its thing, Rust do its thing, and then they come together. And it's pretty neat.
I'm still waiting on the blog
Importantly
post
as
on
well, we haven't just heard about Rust and thought it's cool and let's add some Rust. We benchmark everything very, very aggressively and in a very detailed way. So there have been certain times where we've evaluated something, and TypeScript is the more performant way to do it on aggregate, like or for the user experience that matters. There's an awful lot of projects out there that entirely exist on hype because of the tool that they chose to write the tool in. And we are an established tool that has now figured out surgically which pieces make sense, which are critical hot paths that Rust can add value to without taking value away from the extensibility of the tool. And
exactly.
that blending is the opposite to a lot of projects who've gone all in on the buzzword super fast thing, and then they come to build user experiences and they find actually it's quite difficult to do that. So that's I think that's a really important point, is that we don't just think Rust is cool. We benchmark aggressively and figure out the right tool for the job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we also waited a good amount of time, like in sense of like an appropriate amount of time. Because like a lot of tools like when to go, right? Because which was on our table as well. Maybe we could even talk about like some of the decisions that went into that, like going for Rust versus Go. But at some point we were like, let's just go with Go and those core parts. And some tools actually have gone that way and now kind of reverting back, going over to the Rust ecosystem again. So it seems like many of the dev tools are converging on Rust. So
yeah. I also want to add with to what James was saying. We have plugins in NX, right? And the plugins are still written in JavaScript, and those are loaded in JavaScript. And none of that plugin information actually gets into Rust side. So Rust, in that sense, doesn't get in your way. We just tell Rust, hey, this plugin gave us this this glob. Just make sure that when you look for the files, mark these as configurations, and then we give it back to Node, and Node does all that handling. So our plugin story is very not complex, I would say. We don't have to worry about doing so much stuff in Rust, and that's because of the history of NX, where it was built with JavaScript first, and we did take the pieces that we thought would be the most performant or the most beneficial to move to Rust. And then that's and we're pretty happy with what we have so far. And of course, not everything is golden and shiny. There's some growing pains that we found out, mostly because we don't support all platforms that Node does. And Node could basically run on your toaster. We can't, right? We're limited to what GitHub Actions gives us to build on, and that's basically Mac, Linux, Windows, and then there's some support for FreeBSD, but that's our pain point right now. So if you are on a platform that isn't like the big major 3 platforms, NX kind of won't work well on it because of that fact. But we are trying to work around it, and we're waiting for WebAssembly support in our framework that we're using. And we're using a framework called NappyRS.
Yeah,
they're very close from what I see in their issues and all that. So basically, having support for WebAssembly will give us access to support all those platforms that Node supports, even your toaster and StackBlitz and those web containers.
StackBlitz is high on the list. A lot of people have asked for that, which unfortunately we had to break at some point because of
we had to break it. It was unfortunate. But we will bring it back eventually once we are able to compile to WebAssembly.
Nice. And we also we also work, like some of the parts, right, involved also the whole TypeScript mapping resolution, right, where we connect like the project graph based on TypeScript projects that we have within our workspace. And we had some videos on Twitter going on, I think, and in some of our docs as well. But like the speed improvement there was also quite good, right? It was like I think twice, right, roughly.
Yeah.
In terms of what Rust can do versus TypeScript.
Yeah, I think we could even get that faster, but it's okay for now.
Yeah,
Can always go
it's
fast.
very strategic. Like we've been working on it since February of last year, 2023. And we are just now at 1% of Rust. So we've been pretty deliberate about where we decide to use Rust, and we're really looking for speed out of Rust. So just to put it in context of just how much we are going into Rust, it is entirely for speed, not just because we like writing in Rust or like we think that everything needs to be written in Rust. TypeScript is still 99% of the code, or whatnot.
Absolutely. Cool. We have only so much time, so let's jump on to one of the next topics, which is NX release, which is why we have Mr. James Henry on board here as well. He worked mostly on that or had kickstarted. I just wanted to initially also bring up that we have now also a page that documents how at least the current version of NX release works. James will be talking about like there's way of stuff ahead of what the next release can be. But if you go to our docs right now, under the core features, you will find an entry manage releases, which gives you an overview of how things work, as well as the programmatic API and stuff. So you can start checking it out, and we will start expanding these because clearly there's like a huge number of use cases of how you could use an NX release and like what purposes it could solve, right?
Yeah, exactly. So NX release is it's a common thing that across NX workspaces you have some need for versioning of your software, because a lot of the time you are building software and you're bringing it together and you're getting the benefits of monorepos, but you still want to take that software and put it somewhere else and either deploy it in some manifest or consume it in a different workspace somewhere else. And you need versioning and publishing for that. And it was historically a part of the ecosystem where we just encourage folks to wrap existing tools, because obviously NX is very good at wrapping existing tools. It's our bread and butter.
Which you can still do, even though
exactly.
Right?
It's still very much available. Code generators help you generate config for other tools. That works with versioning and publishing tools as well. But because it's such a common case, and because there's so many different types of workspaces we support, we felt like there wasn't really a great selection of tools for versioning and publishing out there that allowed you to easily get up to speed with the different types of flavors of NX workspaces with mixed apps and libraries and different ecosystems and languages and everything like that. A lot of versioning and publishing tools are very specific to a particular problem area. And so we approached NX release from the point of view of building some primitive concepts, a bit like we have executors and generators and stuff as primitive concepts that you can take and run with. We wanted to approach the versioning and publishing thing from a set of building blocks that you can take and apply to different workspaces with different needs. So that involved having some quite clear phases of versioning and publishing. The versioning, the changelog generation, and the publishing are essentially 3 pillars of the release process. And I use release because I do feel like over time we will more and more provide guidance for people doing application deployments under this umbrella. But initially, to get this product, if you like, we call it a product like this feature set up and running, it's focused on JavaScript library publishing. But there is nothing about the implementation that is coupled to JavaScript library publishing. We provide a generator behind the scenes and an executor behind the scenes, which plug in the functionality that's NPM and JavaScript specific. But you could take a Rust crate publishing executor and stick it in there already today if you were feeling very adventurous. And you could add your own versioning generator, which versioned your cargo TOML files if you wanted to today. That would already work with NX release. The big difference is over time, we will add more and more guidance, more and more tutorials on how to do that kind of stuff. And I'm sure some of our NX champions, maybe some people on the team, will provide some of those things out of the box so you can either use them directly or tweak them to your needs. And the reality is, with a lot of tools, they are CLI based exclusively. And so you often end up with a million different CLI flags. And some of them, over time, they end up disagreeing with each other and being quite hard to undo some of them and the meaning of them, etc. So immediately what we've done is we've added a programmatic API for NX release. And I imagine this is what will be used by a lot of folks, to be honest, because again, we want to offer NX release not as some always works with zero config, although you can start with NX release with zero config. I imagine a lot of workspaces will need to tailor it to their needs of their particular preferences for versioning and publishing. And so you can access the logic as functions in a JavaScript script or a TS Node script or whatever. And you can create your own mini experiences off the top of quite powerful building blocks, again, which are all pluggable with custom generators, with a custom changelog renderer, with a custom publish executor. You can plug into these things and then also orchestrate them how you need to with the programmatic API. So there's an awful lot of guidance we still need to provide in terms of written documentation and tutorials, and we will make things more configurable without needing to plug in these fundamental building blocks. So for example, with changelog generation, you can now add a custom changelog renderer to swap out the whole implementation, but there's more we could do to offer just small tweaks to what we do in our native changelog renderer that we provide out of the box. So there'll be a blend of providing guidance on how to do things yourself and also just us providing you more and more out of the box. But already it's in a good state where we released the NX repo itself from it. Angular ESLint, RxJS, TypeScript ESLint are all using NX release to version and publish their libraries. It all works with modern things like NPM provenance data, so you can publish from CI and have the provenance data flow through to NPM to get the nice little verified check mark. So yeah, we're very happy with NX release and what it can become, but it's already in a pretty good state where it's being actively used by high-profile open source projects. And stay tuned for more and more docs and more examples.
Yeah, I agree. Like the programmatic API, I think that is a key part of like and how many will use it. Because like, it was also one of the main reasons why we stayed out for so long, right? Because people have been asking for this for a long time. But like then it's so nuanced, like depending on your workspace needs of things that you might need to do between one of the steps of like generating the actual versioning and generating the changelog, customizing that, all that stuff, that a lot actually end up having these release scripts, right, where they stick things together. I mean, we used also release it, right, and we stuffed it together in our own custom script and then the next repo. So we then switched to Learn, I think, and now like testing out our own dogfooding our NX release API. So that's another place actually where you can check it out, going to our GitHub repo and see how we do it, which is obviously very custom for our workspace, but you can see also like how the NX release can be powerful, because there we use the whole provenance signing and all that stuff, right? So it's also an interesting part where you can check that out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different approaches to versioning and publishing, even within the JavaScript ecosystem.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We currently offer some of the most common ones, which are like an imperative style where you're telling the tooling, hey, I want to bump by a minor or a patch, or I want to literally bump to this exact Semver version. All of that is supported via an interactive prompt, or you can just tell it directly. We also offer a conventional commit style already, where you read from your Git information and infer that version bump from your Git tags and your Git commits. But we're also going to be adding support for a file on disk based approach. If you think about change sets, for example, that takes a file on disk based approach. Microsoft have a tool called Beachball that does the same thing. They use JSON files. Change sets uses markdown files. But that same kind of concept of some kind of file that you commit alongside your changes, which informs the change going to be made. So instead of using Git information, you have a file that gets read. It's clearly also a popular approach to have that. And we're going to be adding a native concept for that in NX release, which again will be configurable and pluggable and whatever. But that is something we will be adding, let's say Q1 as well. So stay tuned for that.
And yeah, RxJS, like that's something we recently migrated to NX release. We helped Ben here.
RxJS is using the programmatic API. I set that up personally, so I personally like to gravitate towards the programmatic API.
You sweated through the process.
It's pretty straightforward in RxJS's case because it's one package that it's publishing, so it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, I gravitate towards the programmatic API because I think it's nice to see the logic that is expected to run during a release, and you have it there instead of it being somebody on their computer running like 5 ad hoc CLI commands. You can do that if you want to, but on open source projects, I think it's kind of nice to have that logic be clearly identifiable, see it change over time as well. So that's another nice feature of the programmatic API.
Cool. Yeah, I think for simple use cases, the one command release approach could be really beneficial as well, right? Like I was talking to Ken Dots for his Epic Web React Workshop application monorepo, right? Where he doesn't care about publish to NPM, but he actually published to NPM, but it's like a workshop app where the packages are just used within that app because he has some interactive experience during the learning process. And we're going to use NX release there as well. But there, like a simple publishing is enough, also because it already manages all the dependencies that package might have and publishes them in the right order, all that stuff that you might need, right? Which otherwise you need to set up manually.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Let's jump on to the next one, which is a big one, actually. And we're going to, I will mention it again later on, but we're going to have like a launch week in February. Just make sure you chime in on our social channels and newsletters so you get all the information. But we're going to release, and we're currently working on some quite drastic and important changes to NX and to simplify how you use NX, which codenamed is PCV3, so Project Configuration Version 3. We're trying to come up with a cool name, so that's our internal code name if you want. But yeah, I'll let Jason, which is kind of leading a lot of that effort, chime in a bit to explain what it is about. Like maybe also like, because we went like, this is version 3, right? So that means that it has been a version 2 and 1 kind of like, so maybe we could talk a bit about like how that evolved and why that V3 version can be kind of a game changer.
Yeah, it's definitely been a game changer. I think everyone on the team has been really pushing the boundaries of where we're going. I'll go through like kind of what was like V1 and V2. So V1, a long time ago, I think this dates back to like 2018. But like up until 2018, NX has been using like the Angular style of, we have like an Angular JSON, and it like seems like an extension of Angular CLI. But like 5 years ago, we made a decision like we have to kind of break away from that. So we introduced Project Configuration V2. And what that one is that we broke out the one massive Angular.json, which ended up being like thousands of lines for some of our projects, to multiple different project.jsons. So it still used like a lot of the same structure as Angular.json. And this is what a lot of people use today. We have project.jsons. We've also kind of abstracted it to become like, you can have package JSONs, and that also identifies a project and stuff like that. And so if you tuned into NXConf like 3 months ago, we released something that's like a rework of our project graph API, and we split it into like 2 parts of the create nodes and the create dependencies. So what happened was, at the conference, we were preparing on a talk that Gregory made about like, how do we tell people how to create nodes? So we were like, well, you could just like pick every README file and like have it create a target to check like for any grammar mistakes and stuff like that. And it kind of a light bulb turned on for us. And that is the inspiration for project configuration v3 with a better code name pending. So what we're going to be doing is reducing the amount of configuration again. So project.json split all that configuration into different files, but what we're going to be doing is automatically creating targets for NX that integrate with your existing tools. So how we think about a plugin for, let's say, Jest for NX is that it should be very much like your VS Code plugins. So if you're used to using VS Code, or even if you're using IntelliJ, like you'll install a bunch of plugins that make it easier to integrate with the tool via your IDE, right? So you'll be able to go into a spec file and you'll just be able to click like run test, right? But the integration there is pretty broad. Like it can add annotations to your code, it can add like clickable run things, and it's pretty broad. So up until version 2 and what everyone's used to today is that a lot of our plugins will have generators, executors, and some other stuff that are like a little bit less likely to be there for plugins. But the main things are generators and executors. And executors has been this kind of like, this is how NX will run your tool. So if you look through our plugins today, we'll have like specific executors about how do you run Jest and how do you run like Webpack and stuff like that. What we're doing is we're simplifying a lot of that. We've noticed that a lot of people don't like to look at an executor, and we also find it kind of confusing to explain to people that like what does an executor actually do that's different from, say, running just like Jest as a command line tool. So PCV3 is a way for us to look at specific files. So I'll use Jest as an example. We'll look at jest.config.js and ts files in your project, and we'll create automatically the integrations with NX. So a VS Code plugin is going to look at your jest.config and give you integrations into VS Code. NX plugins will look at your Jest config and give you integrations into NX. And that's going to kind of consolidate all of these setup to link Jest to NX via like 5 lines in your nx.json file. And so this is just all about like the configuration part of it. But at the end of the day, you're going to be seeing a lot less of that. And you're going to be seeing a lot less of like black box magic of like how NX runs a tool. It'll boil down to like, we noticed that you have a jest.config.ts. We created a NX target that you can run that just runs the CLI of Jest. And you can update it to run Jest differently via the CLI command and stuff like that. There's a lot of work being done. It's not just Jest. We've gone into like Cypress, Webpack, like basically every plugin that we currently publish, we are making it simpler for the user to adopt. And what this means, so this is why like we need a code name that's like bigger than just project configuration, because it's not just project configuration. Once we simplify the project configuration and like take it away, this is more in an effort to make it easier to adopt NX in general. So any workspace that has a Jest config, right? Like if you open it in VS Code, it works as long as you have the plugin. So the similar thing, like any project out there that has a jest.config will have a very easy way of adding NX to it, plus a plugin that adds Jest. So it's all very vague for now. I think last time I showed like a very like teaserish kind of sneak peek. We're still working on a lot of things. We will be delving into this more in a conference that we're going to be holding in a month. So stay tuned for that. But yeah,
I think like a lot of the, especially I'm super excited about the adoption part as well, because like we had some really good adoption in the sense of like running NX init on whatever package-based mono, like PNPM workspace mono you have, right? And that will give you the task scheduling. But then We still believe highly that the plugins give you a lot of value, right? We've seen it like when we talk to clients, when we adopt them with clients like with really big monorepos. But then if you were on that easily adoptable PNPM workspace monorepo with an X on top of it, moving to the plugins was a bit trickier, right? And so this will open up a lot of the possibilities there to make that that incremental migration, if you want, much smoother, right? Where you just drop in the Cypress plugin, a Playwright plugin, or the Jest plugin, because that's what you want to automate. But the rest of it, you kind of trickle along with what you have already. That an X already helps you navigate through. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, as Jason said, like we will have like a launch week in February where we're going to go deep on each of these topics where we demo it. I think Katrina is so brave as well today to show some of the stuff, at least give us a glimpse on some of the stuff. So we can actually segue over to that one. And that I think you're going to show next, I think, Katrina, right? Which is something we're working on. Because one thing that happened last year as well, like we actually started with Vite, which we looked at, we really like what they do. We started becoming friends with the core contributors there. We have been on both ViteCons as well, which have been really exciting events. Like they really did a great job of launching those online conferences. And so we started adopting Vite actually to make it as one of our main first-class parts in, like, I think React and many other tools, right? Where we kind of took over the world almost last year, right, in terms of adoption. And so we wanted to have that integrated as well. And later, when did Vue come? That's just a couple months ago, right? It's pretty recent because from Vite, then Vue we actually got a lot of requests for Vue. We kind of hesitated a bit because clearly having a native plugin means more maintenance, but we have worked with the community there as well, which had been already developing a Vue plugin for NX. And so we collaborated with them, which was again really great, and to kind of incorporate that into our own NX monorepo to have a native plugin actually to support Vue. But I'll give the word to Katrina, which can talk more about it, which has gone really deep into Vite and Vue and those types of areas.
Yeah, so indeed, I think it was about 1 year ago that we put out the Vite plugin. Yep. And yeah, the Vue plugin, as you said, it's about 2 months. Both the Vite and the Vue plugin there were existing plugins, but we asked for permission, we discussed with the NX extensions team, and we built our own.
They have been the ones paving the way for both of those. They've been finding out all the pain points, and then we kind of started talking about today.
Exactly. They solved all the hard issues, and so yeah, and yeah, the first thing I think we did with Vite was to create some migrations and some configuration generators that could migrate you from Webpack to Vite. And so our React apps, I think, now have the Vite as a default builder. You can choose Webpack as well, but we also integrated Vitest that you can also use. We recently migrated to Vitest version 1. And yeah, the Vue plugin, as Yuri said, was, I think, the natural progression, since I think it's some of the team members are the same and they sort of support each other. And the natural progression after the Vue plugin, of course, was the Next plugin, which we have not released yet because it's going to be just PCV3, and we don't want to release it until PCV3 is ready. But I think people could test it on the Canaries in a few days, maybe. But I can show you a demo if you want. The demo will have Next.
Give us a glimpse.
And we'll also have PCV3, yeah. So this is a new NX workspace, and it has a Next application. So you can generate once the Next plugin will be out, you will be able to generate a new NX workspace choosing Vue and Next as the framework, as you would now do, for example, with React and choosing Next as the framework. And we generate a Next application that has some pages, like an index and about page, and some links to these pages, some components, and the Next config, of course, which you define some things in the config. And let's see how that would look. by doing NX serve. And wait. Yes. So this just serves the next application, right? And then you have an about, a home and an about page. What's interesting is that as you can do in NX workspaces, you can import components and parts from other libraries. So I also have a View library which exports one component called to. And I import it, for example, in my about page, and I can use it in here. Now, what's interesting is that if you go into your Next Applications project JSON, you will not see any targets here. However, I can run serve, I can run build, I can run test, I can run the things that you would expect Next to have. And this is what PCV3 is about. So no targets in project JSON, but if you look into NX JSON, and I'm going to very briefly show this because it's not like the official showcase day. You have a Next plugin defined, which will give you a build and a serve, and a Vite plugin with a test target, because we also have Vitest here. So if I do NX test my app, it will run Vitest. But you may ask, how do I know which targets I have available for my project? And you can do that by doing NX show project. And it will show you what you would normally have in your project JSON, right? You have your targets and you have your build, your serve, your test target, and your link target. Right? And you can also do NX show project JSON false, which will just show you, I cannot make this bigger, even by clicking Command plus, because some people tell me you can just click Command plus. In any case, yeah, this is what will show up, for example, as a summary for the available targets. And this is pretty much the short demo.
Cool. Yeah, I think the main thing here, as we can see, like, is it reduces the product JSON config. And now people might be, yeah, but like, what if I need, like, I don't want to always print that out, right? And look it up what targets there are, right? But I want to be able to maybe like add something or extend something, right? There's still a possibility to do that. Like, in the project, you can override whatever has not been pre-set up for you. It's more like setting up the common cases that you would have just copied all over each of the projects, right? Which are already there for you. And then if you need some custom case or need to tweak it much more, right? So either you pass the options there in NX.json or you dive deeper and just override the command based with your own in a project JSON. So that's still always possible, right? And yeah, that also gives us a nice segue into one of the next topics, because clearly, as you said, like now that we don't see the targets, many people might want to see those, right, in the project JSON and might not want to go over the CLI. We always have NX console. And so that's going to play a much bigger role in kind of improving your experience in working with NX in VS Code or also IntelliJ. So I'll let John dive a bit deeper into it, because like NX console has changed quite a lot last year. We have done a lot there. Max as well as John have worked on it and kind of evolved it quite a bit. So
yeah, so with NX console, like Yuri was saying, once the new PCV3 3 comes out,
that's why we need to change the name.
yeah, we were gonna have a bunch of features in NX console, or basically just one big feature that will show the targets in there and give you a bit more information of what is inferred and all that. There's going to be, I'm not going to be able to show it now. It's still a work in progress. We will definitely show it once we're up into going to the NX Conf. That's in a couple of weeks, I guess. But it's exciting in there. So we're trying to make sure that NX console is there for you once this is ready and all that stuff, so that people don't feel lost.
Absolutely. I think that like the cool part is also like what we did last year in terms of evolving NX console is because we have always had it or for actually quite a long time. I actually remember when there was no VS Code extension, but I wasn't at NX at all at that point. I used NX, but it was like that separate Electron-based app, I think.
Yeah,
it was super early.
It was called Angular Console.
Angular Console, yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Angular Console.
We don't mention that name anymore.
Even though, it's still the ID of the extension, so that's the only mention of it. But it was Angular Console, and then it got to Angular Console and VS Code, and then NX Console. It has no Angular anymore, other than its history of its name. Speaking of that, like an improvement or a change that we did with NX Console was, it was originally, or like the generate UI. There's the old console.
Oh wow! So some old stickers there.
I don't have a new
limited section.
I don't have the new sticker. I have a new sticker somewhere. But anyways, originally the console, the generate UI was written in Angular, and there was a big rewrite that Max did to rewrite it with lit. And we did some talks about this before, where we needed to make the application a little bit lighter because we need to use it for IntelliJ's browser and VS Code 1, and we needed to make sure that things looked native on IntelliJ and native on VS Code. So the UI was rewritten in lit, and then obviously we have the IntelliJ JetBrains plugin that could be used for IntelliJ, CLine, Rust Rover, WebStorm, PyCharm, Golang, and I think that's it.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big move. Like a lot of people have asked for the IntelliJ extension. I just looked it up yesterday. We have now over 100K installed, 100,000K installs there. And 1.5 million in VS Code store, so it's quite a lot of installs. And I said, if you don't use it yet, definitely check it out, because it's gonna be. We have big plans actually, some of which we're only going to reveal like at the launch week, but it's going to be more important even, right? And just enhance your experience even more as it did right now when you work with an X in a workspace. Cool. We're approaching the end, so let's jump on the next couple topics that we have. One of them is module federation. This is specifically a big topic when we talk to enterprise clients that go in the direction of adopting some sort of module federation approach, whether it's just to kind of break up their builds and make them faster via caching, or actually go the full way of creating micro front ends. So, Jack, do you want to talk a bit about like what changed in the last year?
Sure, I think we probably covered in previous shows too, but let me share my screen. I think the most important thing for people to know is to go to the docs, and we added. Wait, I'm not sharing, am I? Here we go.
Not yet.
So we added a couple of sections to both the concepts page or the section for module federation, and also a bunch of recipes. So if you want to learn some of the new concepts that we've added, definitely go here. The concepts here are more general information, and the recipes are more detailed, like how to do certain things. So just a quick recap, we added the ability to start up your applications faster. So if I go here, I have an example. If I do serve the shell, which is a host, it will not, previously it will start up like multiple processes. And here I only have like 4 apps, so it's not going to do any damage. But like, imagine you have 100 remotes. It starts everything. It's going to probably kill your machine, or at least it's going to be very slow. And Column, who's the other person that worked on module federation, put together this demo app. And on previous versions of NX, this will actually just die on most machines because it has like over 100 remotes. On the new version, this starts up in less than 3 minutes on my machine. So 100 remotes, we batch everything into a single file server. So we build everything using NX, so it understands like the host depends on these remotes, build them, we serve it from one directory. So that's the major change we did here. The other change we did is, I guess, to make it more flexible for how people want to consume their application. So by default, the module federation applications generate this remote entry file, which is read in and tells the shell like how to load the app. So that's a very simple way to do it, but it has some downsides. So one downside is that it makes it a little bit slower to start an application. So instead, we created this thing called dynamic federation. So when you generate your application, you can pass in a dynamic like here. And what that will do is I have it locally here, generate this manifest. This manifest, you'll notice it's inside the host asset. So there is a code to basically load this in your application, and we have a utility for this. If I can find it. So be here, this is Angular, but there's also a corresponding one for React. So before you start your application, you basically want to fetch your manifest, which is under the assets folder. And this will register all the dynamic modules or dynamic remotes into your application. So that's one thing we did that a lot of people have been asking. And the other thing that I will call out is we have this generator now to generate, so you can do, I think it's federate module. So if you have any component libraries or anything in your monorepo, you can use this generator to make that into a remote. So it doesn't have to be application anymore. You have like a banner or like a button or something. You can use this to do that.
Nice.
So there's not like any one big feature. We've just been talking to users, seeing what their pain points are, and trying to solve them. So definitely, I think the batching of the remote serve is a huge one. And we've already heard it solves a lot of issues for many teams.
Yeah, I was about to mention like that is one example where you try it out on a huge monorepo, right? And you say like it's not gonna work, right? To serve up like hundreds and hundreds of like servers just to have everything remote served up individually. There's one people bringing up a question. I'm not 100% sure I understand it exact. So whether we are planning on updating the dynamic model federation. I don't understand the context with Angular docs.
I mean, like we currently have actually the example we have is Angular specific. We actually need to add it for React. I just noticed it's missing. So we'll add some recipes for it. But the general utility is there. Like I said, if you run the generator, you can just get that manifest file, which is in JSON, and load it. You can also do different things. Like it doesn't have to be done exactly this way. This is the way that we generate the application. I guess before we move on, we're a little bit short on time. We are also looking at the Module Federation 1.5, which is, if anyone's keeping up with RSPack stuff, they announced Module Federation support inside RSPack. And this is using 1.5 version of Module Federation, which actually unlocks a lot of cool things. So it gives you more ability to control like how exactly shared libraries are loaded. So currently, like you can tell it to share or not share, but beyond that, you don't really have much control. And the new version, you can actually do dynamic logic during runtime when your application is running to load different things differently, pull from different remotes and stuff like that. So it's something we've heard from users in the past. Like, since we understand their projects and their workspace a lot, can't we do something smarter with how we're loading things, like where to pull different things from? Like, for example, React and Next has to load from the host. It cannot load from the remote. So like currently you don't have control over that, but moving forward, we will have control. So something that we're experimenting with and see how we can plug it in.
100%. Yeah, I think like the RSpec folks, since Zach Jackson joined the team full time, right? At ByteDance, like that's definitely a project to look out for, like for Module Federation and which direction they're heading. And we're close in touch with them from the very beginning, so they'll keep us up to date, and we'll look into implementing some of those features and support. Cool. Let's move on to the final thing that we have on. One thing that you might have noticed is we changed our tagline. There goes more work into such a simple line as you would imagine. But basically, what we try to do, or we push a lot forward, is the emphasis on the CI part, right? So since whenever we started with NX Cloud and DT and remote caching, we already kind of moved into the direction like that is supposed to help you kind of tame your CI build times, make them faster. And so I'll let Alton and Ben talk a bit more about like where we're heading there. So basically, if you go here, you can already see a couple of those changes that lead to links directly in our docs. We also updated our docs to have a direct CI section in there where we kind of focus much more on the CI experience because that tightly connects to a monorepo. So usually whenever you have a monorepo, you want to build it on CI, that's when you're going to hit potentially some challenges, and so that's where we want to be there and help out there as well. I need to decide, Alton or Ben, whoever wants to talk a bit more where you're going.
Yeah, we also, speaking of refresh of website, we also did a really small refresh on the NX app as well. And yeah, that, I don't know if you can show it, but yeah, there's one where we also showing the NX replay, the NX agent, and the NX workflow, which are coming soon, which will be discussed during the famous week release that we have on February. But yeah, so I guess I'm gonna start talking. And since 2023, on the NX Cloud application side, we did a lot of things. On the UI part, we basically revamp the application in the UI and technologically, where I think we are in a good state right now, and we have been crunching features like one after the other. But also on the backend side, we were able to push forward with new product that you will be able to use. That will tremendously change the way that you are using your CI, and kind of focus on waiting less, basically, for your CI build to come. So we have those three categories. We have the NX replay, which is the remote cache. We have the NX agents, which I think we can go a little bit deeper. Alton, do you want to explain that?
Absolutely. I mean, like those are the ones that, like, NX agents is one of the big changes, right, that we make to, like, it's almost an evolution of DT. We'll really push forward. Much more details will come again at the launch week, where we have individual talks that dive really deep into some of those, but we could definitely go over some of these because people can already check it out kind of like today, what they can expect in February.
Yeah, so coming in February, we'll have a general availability for NX agents. So kind of like Yuri and Ben both said, this is just an evolution of DTE, where we can make it even more smart and even more aware of your workspace. And so that unlocks us, the ability to do some really powerful things there regarding scaling agents up and down, making sure we have an efficient number of agents given the size of a change set, making the amount of CI configuration that you really need to get things going extremely small. So if you go check out some of these doc pages from nx.dev right on the homepage, like Yuri was showing, we've actually got some kind of teaser for what the configuration looks like. So it's as simple as adding a single line to the default config that will generate for you in CI, and you can get everything distributed. And it's really cool. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're looking for NX agents. I mean, cutting it a little short because we're
we're almost exactly like 2 minutes over time, but I think that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. This page probably is the one that has all the information we have right now, or we can share right now, as we kind of evolve the product until the official launch, like in February. There's also another video. Basically, Victor jumped into recording videos again, so definitely make sure you check those out. Like, there's this one here where he actually uses the time for end-to-end tests in a combination with the feature that we have talked about earlier that is in NX now, together with NX agents, and he cut it down from 90 minutes roughly, I think it was, like to under 10 minutes. So that's pretty impressive, but just increasing the amount of distribution at a much more fine-grained level. And there's also another one where he looks really suspicious, I would say. So definitely check out that video as well. I think where he dove a bit more into Playwright, to have like that example also. So definitely go to our YouTube channel and check it out there. Regarding the launch week that we talked about a couple of times today, we will share much more info either later this week or beginning next week. So we'll find links where you can register to make sure you get the infos when things are going out. But it will be happening the first week of February. So we'll have an entire week where each day we launch new stuff, including a longer form if you want, online conference midweek, where we actually will have talks that go into the PCV3, whatever the new name will be at that point, but much more in detail on some of those aspects with actual hands-on demos. And obviously, CI will be a big part there with NX agents and all the things that we can do with that. Cool. I think that's it. Any closing words for someone else? All good.
Happy New
Perfect.
Year, everyone. It's gonna be exciting.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining. Bye-bye.
See you.